Hi, and welcome to the Canvas Church podcast, where you can listen to our weekly sermons. Thanks for joining us on this journey as we look to God's Word to mold us into people becoming the church.
Great to see you all here. Hope you're having a fabulous weekend so far. I echo what Annie said earlier as our hosts. If you're a guest, we're super pumped that you're here. Carve out part of your Memorial Weekend to come and hang out with us, and really thankful for that. If we don't have an opportunity to meet between now and the time that you drive out of our parking lot, my name is Nate, and I get to serve on the team here at Canvas Church. Now, I'd love to shake your hand and get your name before you leave, but just in case, I'm Nate, and it's really good to have you here. Now, this is Memorial Weekend. I mean, how many times do we have this kind of weather on Memorial Weekend in North Idaho? It's phenomenal. I just keep pinching myself like this is really happening right now. You know, all the barbecues are a go. Everything that you had planned and hoped to do, you get to pull it off. Like, it's incredible. Now, in the midst of a fun weekend like this with the sun shining and all of that, it's easy to lose sight of what the weekend is all about. It's not just an extended weekend. It's not just a time to get together with friends. It's really a time to honor those who sacrificed it all. The men and women who have given up their lives in order for us to have freedom. You know, as we reflect this weekend on the meaning of Memorial Day, it's an opportunity to remember the cost of liberty. Liberty does not come free, and we have those who have sacrificed it all in order for us to gather together in a space like this and worship our Creator together. They sacrificed it all so that we could gather together with family and friends and enjoy a long, extended weekend. So we pause in remembrance and with gratitude for those who have sacrificed it all for our country. And here's my hope, that throughout the weekend, that you take some time, maybe you're standing by the barbecuer and you're grilling some hot dogs or flipping some hamburgers, that you just really pause and reflect on the magnitude of the sacrifice that was made for us. Now this morning, as Shay wonderfully did, she caught it, right? Chasing after, I screwed up the title. We were giving her a hard time in our pre-gathering huddle if she was going to get it right, and there I blow it. So this series, Chasing After, we're in part 4 of Chasing After. And this morning, I want to kick it off by reading the opening poem of Ecclesiastes chapter 3. This morning's message is titled, Hands of Time. This poem is probably the most familiar poem, the most familiar passage out of all of Ecclesiastes. And it makes sense why. It's so poetic. It gives a lot of depth and a lot of meaning. So let's jump in and read what the teacher has to say by way of poem this morning. Chapter 3, verse 1 says this: For everything there is a season, a time for every activity under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to harvest, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to cry and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to turn away, a time to search and a time to quit searching, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be quiet and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. Here's the question I want to kick us off with this morning. Question that I hope that you wrestle with today and continue to wrestle with until you get some answers on it. And here's the question: what season are you in right now? What season are you in right now? Maybe you haven't given that much thought. Maybe that's the first time a question like that has been posed to you and you're thinking to yourself, well, clearly we're in spring. And I'm not just talking about what season of the calendar year, fall, summer, winter, spring. I'm talking about what season of your life are you in currently. For the day home, we're in a brand new season. We're like in the transition to a brand new season. We now have 3 adult children and only 1 teenager. It's wild. It's a craziness. Some of you guys, you've already been down the journey. You know exactly what we're walking through. Others of you, you've got little kids running around and life is just completely chaotic, and you are dreaming of the day when you have 3 adult children and only 1 teenager. Because it's wild and crazy, but it's very interesting being in this kind of transition season as our kids are now adults and they're making decisions for themselves. And it's so much fun watching them navigate. But it's also at the very same time challenging because we want to hold on tightly. We love our kids. We love being with our kids, and this idea that we have to let them go and experience life on their own, it's hard. It's challenging. It's a brand new season for us. So that's what's going on in our lives. But the question, if we could go around, it'd be fun to hear all of the stories that you have. But here's the question once again, like, what season do you find yourself in? What season are you in life? Some of you are in a season of weeping. Others, you're in a season of laughing. Some of you are in a season of building, and others of you are in a season of breaking. Some of you are in a season of holding on, and some of you, like us, you're in a season of letting go. This poem that the teacher writes to us in Ecclesiastes, it reminds us that every season has a purpose. There is a time for every season. Every season has purpose. Even the painful and the absolutely confusing seasons, they still have purpose in our life. Not only does it remind us that every season can have purpose, it also gives us permission to be real honest about the season we're currently in. I find great comfort in the fact that I just get to be honest about this reality that we are in a transition period in our lives. And in the transition period, just being honest about where you're at, like, it is so helpful because in the transition of seasons, don't you find yourself at times just getting really frustrated? Like, let's just use the real seasons for example. In North Idaho, spring can be a wily little thing, can it? You dress for one temperature and then all of a sudden out of nowhere, it's a whole different temperature. Yesterday, I have no idea what I was thinking. I didn't look at my app. I didn't know how hot it was going to be for the day, but I found myself profusely sweating most of the day because it was way warmer than I thought. And when you're not real honest about the season you're in, you find yourself getting very frustrated with life. You're dressed for you're dressed for winter and actually you're in the middle of summer. You're just baking to death. Or you're in the middle of winter and you're dressed like it's summer and you're freezing cold. But Ecclesiastes, this poem, gives each of us permission to be real honest about the season that we're in. And this seems like inside of this poem, the teacher is inviting us to see that God is still at work in every season of our life. I hope for you this morning that's good news. For some, that's the encouragement that you needed to hear today because you're walking through it right now. Life is incredibly challenging, chaos all around you, and you're thinking to yourself, there's no way possible that this has any purpose to it. I hope this morning that you recognize the season, whatever it looks like for you, and this is not to minimize the season that you're in, but to recognize that God wants to use this season. He is still at work in this season in your life. Now, I think it would be remiss if I didn't follow that up with, hey, you don't have to like your season. Just because God is at work in your season does not mean you got to like your season. And I think sometimes we conflate those two things. We think that in order to recognize God is at work in this season means that I'm just loving the season. It's okay to be a summer person and in the middle of winter be like, I can't wait for summer to come. That's completely fine. So you don't have to like your season. However, if you're going to find purpose, if you're going to find fulfillment, if you're going to find contentment in this life, You have to learn to trust that. You don't have to like it, but you have to learn to trust that the one who made time holds yours in his hand. The one who made time holds yours in his hand. I want to keep reading what the teacher has to say in Ecclesiastes after this poem. He goes on in verse 9 to say, "What do people really get for all of their hard work? I have seen the burden God has placed on all of us. Yet God has made everything beautiful for its own time. He has planted eternity in the human heart. But even so, people cannot see the whole scope of God's work from beginning to end. So I concluded there is nothing better than to be happy and enjoy ourselves as long as we can. And people should eat and drink and enjoy the fruits of their labor, for these are good gifts from God. And I know that whatever God does is final. Nothing can be added to or taken away from it. God's purpose is that people should fear him. What is happening now has happened before, and what will happen in the future has happened before, because God makes the same things happen over and over again. I also noticed that under the sun there is an evil in the courtroom. Yes, even the courts of law are corrupt. I said to myself, in due season, God will judge everyone, both the good and the bad, for all of their deeds. One of humanity's greatest limitations is our inability to see the full scope of God's work from beginning to end. We do not have the ability to see all that God has done, all that God has designed to do, all that God has planned. We have such a very, thumbnail sketch is even a bit too generous for the viewpoint that you and I have as God's creation. We just simply do not have all that God has planned in our view. We're very limited. We can't stand far back enough from creation to see God's plan and God's design. I remember several years back, there was a movie that came out. We decided it was one of those that you had to go to the theater to see. I don't remember what the movie was called, but we go to the theater because we want to see it, right? We want the Dolby surround sound. We want it all. We want to feel it. Now, here was the problem with our plan is that everybody else in the community decided they wanted to see it also. And they wanted to see it on the same day we were watching it. And they were all far more punctual than we were. So we go into the movie theater and we look around, you kind of, there's the half wall that's coming down. You kind of walk in, cool, calm, and collected. And you're like, no seats, I was holding my pop, by the way. That was what that was. And I'm looking there's no seats except for the very front row. I'd never experienced the very front row of a movie theater before. I thought, hey, this might be a good opportunity to finally experience it. I was wrong. We walk our way down to the front row. We sit down in those seats, and I look at the screen. In the opening scene, maybe you're going to know what the movie is. I don't remember, but the opening scene was a train wreck. I felt like I was a part of it. All of a sudden, I hear screeching. I hear craziness. I don't know where to look on. I have no idea where it's coming from. I'm looking around on the screen. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And all of a sudden, a train comes along. I was nauseous. We were so close to the screen. A few minutes later, somebody starts talking. I can't figure out who's talking on the screen. I can't see people. Just too close to the screen. It's just a picture of what it's like for us as humans trying to understand the grand scheme that God has planned, the way that he has designed this whole thing to play out. We are so close to it. We see just a microscopic image, a microscopic view of what God has in place, what God has planned for his people. And as a result of our limitations, the magnitude of God's design and God's plan, it just simply escapes us. in God's full sovereignty, the fact that God is in absolute control, that nothing takes him by surprise, that God has got this under control. God is sovereign, and he's walking this out for us and trusting in that. I had dinner with some friends here this last week, and in the midst of our conversation, one of them says that the God of the outcomes is still the God in the process. And sometimes when we're so close to whatever it is we're going on, it's so hard to see that God has got this all under control. He is sovereign, and we don't need to overlook that. When we miss the magnitude of God's plan and the fullness of God's sovereignty, we're left trying to make sense of the hands of time all on our own, aren't we? We're left processing just from a human point of view all by ourselves. And when we're processing by ourselves, removed from the reality that God is sovereign and he's in control, that he's got this thing all planned out, it's easy to ignore God. It's easy to lose sight of God. It's easy to be engulfed by all of the circumstances surrounding us. See, time keeps moving and seasons keep coming and they keep going. And without intentional, slow down, purposeful reflection, we can drift through life just simply on autopilot. And that's what this series has been about, to disrupt the autopilot that we're walking through. Just simply one step after another, one day after another, and really give a critical inventory of our lives. What are we chasing, and why are we chasing after it? And this morning, we're going to look at the hands of time from two different perspectives. I kind of hinted to it a couple of weeks ago in the message, and this morning we're going to dive just a little bit deeper on it, because I think that if we would really process these two different perspectives, we could really begin to hone on which perspective we have. And once we understand what perspective we have, then it could change the way we are engaging in the season that we're in right now. So the two different perspectives we're going to look at, one is the secularist. So the secularist perspective is the secularist sees life from purely a human perspective. They've disassociated what we're experiencing in this life from God. So it's just simply a human perspective. In fact, we've talked about this week after week that's primarily the viewpoint that the teacher in Ecclesiastes is viewing everything from. Does not have eternity in mind, but he's processing everything under the sun, meaning his whole perspective is what you and I can perceive, what we can observe, what we experience as human beings. So God is removed from the picture. So that's the secularist point of view. The other point of view is the believer's point of view. And the believer trusts God from a faith perspective. I love this word faith. It's a complex word. It takes a lot of wrestling, all the time, to get my hands around, to get some handles on this word faith. The word faith in and of itself, it indicates that you and I don't have a complete picture. God has given us enough evidence to anchor our hope to, but then he calls us to step out into areas that we just simply don't know the outcomes. This is faith. So we can experience this life as the secularist, God removed from the picture, or we can experience this life as a believer, recognizing and trusting that God has this all worked out. Now, for the secularist, time feels very random. It's random. It feels like it's driven by chance, luck, or just sheer effort, right? I'm just gonna grit my teeth and I'm gonna make it through this thing. Life just seems so chaotic and so random. Because of that, they become prisoners of a system that cannot be broken and cannot be bent to their will. They try so hard Like if only I do enough right things, and they put their minds to that, and then all of a sudden a diagnosis comes that completely changes everything. A pink slip comes and their company shuts down and they lose their job, and they're just left like, what in the world have I been giving myself over to? It all seems so random, and that's why verse 12 helps us understand the secularist point of view. Verse 12 is as good as it gets for the secularists. And that's why it says there is nothing better than to be happy and enjoy ourselves as long as we can. Just going to simply do my best to enjoy myself as long as I can, because that's as good as it gets. Now, there's something that creeps into environments and people like most of us in this room. Believers. Like if you hear and you're a secularist, my hope is by the end of this that you at least question, like, what would it look like to put my faith and trust in Jesus? I can be anchored to something that has a bigger perspective than I do. But there's another category of secularism as well. It's called secularized religion. We talked about this a while back, and secularized religion is just very surface level. It's surface level. It's a superficial form of religion. So it has form. So it looks like it's religious, looks like it's good. It's got some form, but it just doesn't have any substance to it. Like we talk about God with our mouths, but then we live as if he doesn't exist. There's some moralism with no worship. Meaning I do the right things, but I just do it so that I look good in the eyes of the people around me, but I'm not actually living as if it's worship to God. Because for secularized religion, God, although we talk about him, he's still removed from the picture in our eyes. We're still trying to grin and bear it on our own. So what happens is we use God by name only. We're not actually surrendered to him. That might look more respectable. It might be more comforting, but in the end, it's just as hollow, if not more hollow, than the secularists, because we've convinced ourselves that we're right and we're morally good, but yet, life still seems to be so meaningless. Now, for the believer, on the other hand, every tick of the clock is held in the hands of a sovereign God. I want you to let that sink in for a moment. Like, think about how amazing it is. Not a second goes by that God has not ordained in our lives. The ticking of the clock. Tick, 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 tick. It's all held in the hands of a sovereign God. And not only is it held in the hands of a sovereign God, nothing has been overlooked. That God has seen it all. He knows it all. Whatever's happened in your life, it wasn't because God turned his back for a second and then he turned around and was like, whoa, I didn't know that was going to happen. Sorry, my bad. Should have kept an eye on you. Everything is held in the hands of a sovereign God who has not overlooked anything. And for me, I find great assurance in this reality that the one who created time holds my time in his hands. But here's the question. How do you move from one perspective to another? How do you even know necessarily what perspective you are currently operating under? Well, I would say, just in short, like moving from one perspective to the other is eventually you have to stop resisting the season that you're in and start trusting that God, who holds time, has it all under control. In Ecclesiastes, chapter 3 helps us get our minds around it. It doesn't just describe the rhythm of life, it invites us to reflect. It invites us to think critically and honestly about where we are at. And when we'll pause long enough to think critically and honestly about the season that we're in, it can help change our perspective. It can reveal what perspective we have. And then we have the opportunity to change the perspective we currently hold. So, what I want to do is ask a few more questions. And I want to ask a few more questions, and then I want to juxtapose with these questions the secularist and the believer. And then leave you to ask yourself, which one do I want to be? How do I want to operate in this life that we're in? Do I want to do it as a secularist? Do I want to do it as someone who is engaged in secularized religion? Or do I want to do it as a true believer? Do I want to remove God from the picture, even if I communicate about him with my mouth, but live as if he doesn't exist? Or do I want to actually engage all that's going on in my life and the world around me as if God, who planned it all out, sovereign and in control over it all, is actually in control? So here's the question. Are you in a season of waiting? Right now, are you in a season of waiting? You have a picture of what you want in life, but right now it seems like you are on perpetual pause. And all of life is going by, but here you are sitting. Are you in a season of waiting? See, when a secularist is in a season of waiting, they see it as a waste of time. They think to themselves, this season of waiting, all this is an obstacle between me now and me in the future. They cannot see this time of waiting as useful. They can't see it as something that they want to learn something in. They just simply see it as a waste of time. So they're constantly charging forward in hopes that they can break the door open. Have you ever been in a situation that it just doesn't seem like things are moving forward, so you just keep getting bigger crowbars? If I get a big enough lever, I'm going to make this thing move in my direction. Only to regret that decision down the road. Rather than trusting the waiting, the season of waiting, the secularist sees it just as an absolute waste of time, an obstacle to what they want. However, for the believer trusts that God is not wasting their waiting, but rather he is working through it. If you're in a season of waiting right now, God is not wasting your wait. He's not wasting it. He has a plan in it. Maybe you think that he's overlooked you. He sees everybody else. He's doing what he wants to in their lives or what they want him to do in their lives. But for you, you're just overlooked. Can't be seen. God's forgotten about you somehow. I hope you hear loud and clear this morning that God is not wasting your waiting, but rather he's working in it to do something that you might be too close to see what's going on. But if we trust, if we truly want to operate as believers, we trust that the sovereign God has it under control and he will use your waiting for his good, for your good and his glory when it's all said and done. So, are you in a season of waiting? Or how about this? Are you in a season of loss? Are you in a season of loss right now? Loss is no fun. Nobody likes loss. Again, you don't have to like your season. Nobody likes to lose something unless it's weight. That's fun. But are you in a season of loss? And for the secularist, in a season of loss, loss is simply meaningless. There is no way this has any purpose to it. There's no way. In fact, for the secularist, a season of loss is actually proof positive that this world is cruel and completely random. Because the secularist looks out at all of the travesty in the world and they ask this age-old question, why does bad things happen to good people? Why? Like, you've definitely heard somebody say along the way, somebody passes from this life to the next way too early. And the thought is, why would God take somebody so good? I could have given him a list of 10 other people that would have been better to rid the planet of. For the secularists, in a season of loss, they just can't get their minds around it. It's just proof that this world is actually cruel and random. But the believer trusts that even in sorrow, even sorrow has meaning in the hands of a sovereign God. That God can take your sorrow and he uses it as a refining, as a refiner of our lives. He uses it to make us run to him in comfort. In fact, the book of Corinthians tells us that whenever we're walking through difficult situations, the God of all comfort, he comforts us in all of our sorrows. That God shows up. It's not random. God shows up in the midst of it and he wants to use it. He's not going to waste your sorrow. In fact, he's going to use it to help you draw close to him. And once you walk through sorrow, then he uses you to help others walk through their sorrow as well. So if you're in a season of loss right now, again, I don't mean to minimize your loss. That is not the goal at all. Rather, I mean to encourage you that God will use even your sorrow for his glory and for your good. Lean into it. It's not wasted time. It's not just cruel and purposeless. That God can use even loss, can refine us even in loss. So are you in a season of loss? Those are great questions for you to decide. Like, am I approaching this life from a secularist point of view, a secularist perspective, or am I approaching it as a true believer, recognizing God has it all under control? The third and final question is, are you in a season of joy? So are you in a season of waiting? Are you in a season of loss? And are you in a season of joy? This poem in Ecclesiastes, it lays out this wide spectrum of potential seasons we could be walking through. And if you're in a season of joy right now, I celebrate with you. Love seasons of joy. I don't want seasons of joy to end. I want to experience them perpetually. But if you've lived longer than 5 days, you know this joy, this experience, this happiness, it just simply fades away, doesn't it? And for the secularist, that becomes a real problem because the secularist sees joy as something to chase or cling to instead of letting it get away, instead of letting it slip away. Like it is something they have to chase after and hold on to make sure that I always have this feeling of joy. This feeling of joy, as we all know, it just simply is slippery and it fades away from us. So what happens when your ultimate pursuit in this life is to experience the feeling of joy again and again and again? It leads you into addictive behaviors where you constantly are chasing the feeling. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago, that when pleasure becomes the goal, it simply fades faster. Can't have it. It always fades away. So for the secularist, the season of joy is something like, man, I cannot let this season go. So they keep doing whatever it is that makes them find joy, whether it's spending, whether it's buying, going on trips, like whatever it is. None of those things are bad or wrong. But if we're in pursuit of them because we can't stand the thought of letting go of this joy, that becomes a problem. That becomes a prison. For the believer, they trust joy as a true gift from God. They recognize joy in even the smallest things, like a meal and a conversation with a friend. Sitting down for a cup of coffee with a beautiful sunrise or a beautiful sunset, enjoying it with the companionship of others. They recognize joy, or this feeling of joy, is not something that they can cling to, hold on to, keep for themselves, but rather it's going to come and it's going to go. And when you're experiencing it, you experience it as a good gift from a good God. And because of that, then all of a sudden you can have a heart of absolute gratitude for the gift that God has given. So for the secularist, life is moving toward a void constantly. Constantly moving in the direction of a void, towards meaninglessness, right? If this, what we're experiencing here and now, is all there is and there's nothing in eternity, then they're constantly working themselves towards a void. And it makes sense why they want to grab a hold of every piece of joy they could possibly have, and they want to avoid every possible pain, because in the end, it's all over. But for the believer, life is moving towards eternity. There's something greater than what we're experiencing now. I've heard it said like this: for the unbeliever or the secularist, this world is as good as it gets. It's as good as it gets. So of course, you're going to make every effort to make this as good as it possibly can. Make earth your heaven. But for the believer, the saying goes, so for the unbeliever, this is as good as it gets. For the believer, though, this is as bad as it gets, because we're working our way towards eternity. We're working our way towards meaning. And that's why in the scriptures it says, so we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen, for what is seen is temporary, and what is unseen is eternal. So here's a question for you this morning. How do you want to approach this life? Do you want to approach it as a secularist? Or do you want to approach it as a believer? And for some of you this morning, you walked through these doors as an unbeliever, as a secularist. And I want to have a conversation with you. We're going to wrap up here in a minute. But before you leave, I'd love to talk with you about what it would look like for you to step over the line of faith, put your hope and trust in Jesus, and your perspective then radically shifts from the temporary to the eternal. Or maybe you walked in here today as a church-going moralist, for you, you're doing the right things, but yet you walk through these questions, you began to think to yourself, I still think that I approach this life more as a secularist than I do as a believer. I'd love to have a conversation with you as well. Let's talk about what it looks like to all of a sudden begin to approach these different seasons from a believer's point of view. Because for a believer, they recognize this life is not just a stopgap. This is a place where we have an assignment. And as a true believer, we can face this assignment and help point others to Jesus. I have two takeaways for you. We're going to pray, and then we're going to be out of here. First takeaway is this: slow down. Actually, it's one takeaway broken up into two different parts. Here's the takeaway: slow down this week and ask and reflect on these two questions. So you got to pause. Slow down. Here's the two questions. God, what are you teaching me in this season? That's a great question, because all of us get to ask it. God, what are you teaching me in this season of my life? And the second question is this: how can I walk faithfully, not frantically right now? Each of us, God, how can I walk faithfully with you in this season of my life, not frantically? Would you stand to your feet this morning? And as you stand to your feet, I just want to remind you that peace doesn't come from understanding every moment, but rather from trusting the one who holds every moment in his hands. So, Father, thank you so much for that truth. It's revolutionary. It is absolutely freeing. There is liberty in understanding that this is your plan, your design, and you're working it out flawlessly, even if we can't see it. So, God, I pray that you would help us, whether we're waiting, whether we're in loss, or whether we're experiencing joy. Help us to face all of these situations as true believers. We pray these things in your name, Jesus. Amen.
Thanks for tuning in. This concludes today's message. New sermon podcasts are uploaded by Tuesday of each week. We'd also love to invite you to our live gatherings each Sunday at 10 a.m. Our gatherings are also streamed live on YouTube and Facebook each week. On behalf of the Canvas Church team, we hope you have a great week, and we'll catch you next time.